Can this Ram 1500 with the 3.6 liter Pentastar V6 tow with the big boys? Well, today we're about to find out. Not feeling it. Holy smokes! That's a high red line. What is going on today, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today we have this 3.6 liter V6 in this Ram 1500. Now, I know, fear not, guys, the 5.7 liter HEMI, the big boy. I got that lined up soon too, so we'll get that on the channel soon enough. But I figure this is a great starting point for the Ram 1500s, starting with the base V6 engine and just seeing how it tows. Behind me, we have an 8,000 pound trailer. This is the exact same 8,000 pound trailer that I tow with every 1500 truck on the channel. Same trailer, same weight location, giving us the exact same tongue weight. We also tow the exact same 200 kilometer loop, giving us a really good comparison between trucks when it comes to acceleration, fuel economy, pulling hills, engine braking, and just generally how I feel the truck performs. Now, I thought long and hard whether or not to keep this trailer at 8,000 pounds because, well, this V6, the 3.6 liter Pentastar, is only rated to tow 7,600 pounds. And with the configuration of the truck we have here today, this is only rated to tow 6,400 pounds of weight. So we are quite a bit overweight, but I have a feeling that this truck will be just fine. And I feel like it's really important to keep the same weight in our 1500 segment to really give a true comparison of just how good other engines are in comparison to this. Now, speaking of towing performance, this engine is putting out 305 horsepower and a fairly low 273 pound-feet of torque. So we are without a doubt going to be putting a great load on this engine, but I have faith in her. This 3.6 liter Pentastar is a very reliable unit, and well, we'll just have to see how the run goes. Now, last, before we take off, we'll measure the squat on this truck. Call that 38 3/4. We'll drop this trailer. We got 36 1/4. So that's about 2.5 inches of squat. And I mean, I guess to be honest, that's really not too much of a surprise because, well, these Rams come with coil suspension in the back. That's great for ride comfort, but when it comes to putting a load on it, they tend to squat a little bit more. This truck has a max payload of about 1,500 pounds, so we are still very well within spec on our payload, just not so much on our towing number. All right, so without a doubt, this engine is definitely not necessarily happy. I mean, she is revving pretty good, but once she gets up to speed, I feel like we'll be okay. There really is next to zero wind resistance on this trailer. So I think our struggling will all just be getting up to speed. We do have a trailer brake here, and well, the brakes on that trailer is rated for 21,000 pounds. So the brakes on that trailer alone will bring this truck to a stop. So I'm not worried about stopping. It'll just all be that struggle for our acceleration. Speaking of which, we are going to be doing our 60 kilometer to 110 kilometer acceleration test right now. Prayers for the Pentastar, overloaded slightly, but we'll get to 60 kilometers an hour and we will gun this thing, and we'll time our speed to our cruising speed of 110 kilometers an hour. 61, to the floor. Oh, she's not feeling it. Holy smokes! That's a high red line. Jesus. 110. That, honestly, that was a little quicker than I thought. Jesus, this thing's got a high red line. That's probably like 6,500 RPM. I thought for sure she'd shift at like 58. Good to know. Okay, so starting off in the positive column. So I've made a game time decision. We're gonna set our cruise at 105 kilometers an hour versus our normal 110. I just don't want to completely strap this engine out. First little hill here. No surprise, we're at 3,800 RPM. We'll see if we can have enough torque to keep these wheels moving at 105 kilometers an hour. or if we'll have to drop another gear. Nope. 5,000 RPM. We're climbing. She is gonna be working today, boys. All right, we got a nice slow, steady climb here. We're revving quite high, 4,600 RPM. Well, there's an upshift there. We're only at 3,600 RPM. So nice, slow and steady. Now, if you remember that Chevy 2.7 liter turbo, that was at like 2,500 RPM. But that thing is a torque monster. And unfortunately, like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, the torque output out of this engine is just not great at all. I mean, 305 horsepower is plenty, as again we saw with the 2.7 liter turbo engine from Chevy. That only puts out 310, yet it pulled this trailer extremely well, and it's all due to that torque. And this engine lacks torque, and torque is what helps drive those wheels forward going up hills like this. So unfortunately, you can see our oil temps at 106 degrees Celsius. Our transmission temp is also climbing up to 93 degrees Celsius. So we'll have to keep an eye on that up this hill. I think we should be okay. If not, we can always drop the speed. So far, the truck is performing pretty well. It is very clear the thing is not really happy. If this was my own personal truck, I probably wouldn't want to tow with this much weight. But overall, I feel super comfortable. You know, the truck itself, the chassis, the brakes, the suspension, it's all meant to tow a lot more weight than this. So the truck itself is doing just fine. So the pros for this engine are quite lengthy. This has been the top selling engine from Ram for the last 6 years. Actually, in fact, over half of all vehicles sold in North America from Ram have this engine in it. There are over 14 models of cars that use this engine worldwide. There have been over 10 million of these engines actually produced since its debut in 2011, as well as many awards given to this engine for the amount of power it produces for its really compact size. In terms of reliability, this is by far, in my opinion, the most reliable engine option, these Ram 1500s. This engine is more reliable than the 5.7 HEMI and about 1,000 times more reliable than the 3-liter EcoDiesel that used to be available with these Ram 1500s. Now, the average life expectancy for these engines runs around 250 to 300,000 miles, which is pretty impressive. And there are rumors and stories of people running these things over 500,000 miles. So there is some really good reliability and longevity built into these engines. And now I will say, when we are towing just on a relatively flat road with 8,000 pounds behind this engine, we're sitting at 2,200 RPM, which is very, very reasonable. You know, obviously when we're going up and down the hills like you guys saw, this engine is revving up like crazy. But I mean, it just goes to show, if you guys had to tow 8,000 pounds with this engine in a pinch and you weren't going too far, it would probably manage it just fine without damaging anything. So we got some downhill here. We'll see what this engine braking is all about. Might as well go up to 110 kilometers an hour and just see what happens. Going about 112, we're at 2,500 RPM. 115 kilometers an hour, dropped another gear, 3,200 RPM. Seems to be holding us pretty steady at 3,300 RPM. Not bad. I thought for sure she'd downshift again to hold us, but I mean, we are holding pretty good. We're approaching 120. She might downshift again, actually. So yeah, we are approaching 120. So you'd like to see that stay closer to 110 for sure, or have the truck downshift. But not bad, not bad. I think the 5.7 HEMI will be much better at engine braking. In fact, I know it will because, well, I've towed with it. But again, just goes to show, if you have to tow with this thing in a pinch, she'll do it. Won't be happy about it, but she'll do it. Okay, now we're going back up, 5,000 RPM. Let's go. Something interesting with these Ram 1500s is the e-torque system, and every 5th gen Ram 1500 with the V6 comes with them standard now. This engine in this truck is just a normal, naturally aspirated V6. So the main headline you'll read everywhere about the e-torque system in these Ram 1500s is the amount of torque they add to the engine. Now, With this V6, it adds 90 foot-pounds of torque, and I believe with the HEMI, the V8s, it's like 115 foot-pounds of torque, which does sound like a really nice bump in power. And as we've talked about today with towing this thing is lacking torque. So that does sound like a really, really good idea. Now, what Ram fails to mention when they talk about this is that torque is only available right off the line. So that first wheel rotation is when that torque is available, anywhere from 1 to 2 miles an hour. After that, the e-torque system really does not add any torque to the engine whatsoever. And this is why when you look at the actual power figures of an e-torqued engine, the 5.7 HEMI as well as this V6, the power numbers don't change because, well, at speed, there is no added power from that e-torque system. If you guys are more curious about the e-torque system, let me know in the comments. I can grab a truck with an actual e-torque system and I can explain kind of what it does a little bit better. Well, we made it to our halfway point. The truck has not blown up yet. Now, on the back stretch of our towing journey, we run into some pretty steep hills, and I am a little bit concerned about how this truck's gonna handle it. So we'll cross that bridge when we get there, but definitely we are not out of the weeds yet. The back stretch has a ton of steep hills, and this thing was already, you know, struggling pretty good coming here, so we'll see what happens. It's time for our second acceleration test. This time we are going slightly uphill. Usually gives most V8s a good little challenge. This is really, really not gonna like it. All right, so we're just above 60 kilometers an hour. We might give this thing a little bit of a boost. 65K to the floor. All right, here we go. That red line, oh my God. 6,500 RPM, Jesus. Bang, 110. I mean, well, I guess, so yeah, I'm thinking to myself here, I think that makes a little bit of sense because, well, it's got 305 horsepower, which again, is not a crazy amount, but it's definitely more than it has in torque. And so it would make sense that that top end power is definitely where it likes to sit. And you know, when this thing's humming above 6,000 RPM, there is a little bit of get up and go with this load behind it. And then, you know, down low in the RPM band, 2,000-3,000 RPM, it just feels like this engine is pretty dead in terms of power with this load anyways. And I think that makes a lot of sense because, well, you only have 273 foot-pounds of torque. So she is gonna really have to get up in that RPM band to get some of that torque to keep those wheels moving. Here's our first little hill, 4,500 RPM. We're gonna set our cruising speed at 102 kilometers an hour because, well, just because. She's singing pretty good. But again, I mean, you know, it's not like we're losing speed. We're maintaining speed just at 5,000 RPM, that's all. So we haven't even talked about fuel economy yet, and check this out. 17.5 liters per 100 kilometers. That is by far the most fuel efficient run so far, and usually as we get closer to the shop, that fuel economy continues to grow. Well, we're you know, still revving like crazy, as I said we would. Our trans temp, well, 93 degrees. We are climbing. We're not in an absolute panic mode yet for the trans temp, but we're gonna have to keep an eye on that for sure when we get to our biggest hill. We are approaching the biggest hill on the course. It is a really solid pull, and we're just gonna have to see how this engine does. I have a feeling it'll be okay, but we're gonna keep an eye on our transmission temp, our oil temperature as well, and we'll drop the speed back as necessary if those temps get too high, but I have faith we'll be okay. We got a slow truck up here, a little train. So we'll set our cruise to 102 kilometers an hour. And we commence. 2,200 RPM, 2,800 RPM, 3,500 RPM, 4,500 RPM. Will she drop another gear? Ooh! She might have enough torque at 4,500 RPM. Wow, closer to 5,000 RPM now. Oh yeah, this thing's got it all day. I don't even know why I was sweating it. Oil temp 102 degrees. This thing is working though. Trans temp is definitely climbing, 93. Oil's 106. 107 on the oil. Okay. I could have hit that quicker. Oh yeah. Well, that was not as dramatic as I thought it was gonna be. So I'm feeling pretty confident with this engine, and I think what we're gonna do is we're gonna keep at 110 kilometers an hour for the rest of the backstretch here, and see if we can maintain that or if things get a little too crazy. But for now on, 110 kilometers an hour, and we'll see how she goes. Well, this is how she's going, 5,000 RPM, up a nice little hill. Let's keep her coming, baby. Let's go, Pentastar. Come on. We got the Subaru, let's overtake it. Modest 4,000 RPM. I mean, she's keeping speed. It's not like we're dropping speed. There is something to be said about that for sure. All right, here is our last big hill. We're going 110 kilometers an hour like all the other big boys. Oh, we're gonna get jammed here. Never mind, we got slowpoke. Well, that just is gonna mess the whole run up, but that's okay. It's the real world. Shit happens. Let's make the pass here. 4,500 RPM. I mean, it is cool to see on the hill there is still power to gain speed, so we're not dropping speed, but in order to maintain 110, we will be at 5,000 RPM all the way up. Oh yeah, she's just humming along. 5,100 RPM. Look at that. She is buzzing. Woo! Well, we are approaching the end of our 200 kilometer towing stretch, and I mean, I think for what the engine is, it's done pretty well. I'm not gonna say I'm impressed with the engine per se, but I think what I'm gonna note is that as the run has gone on, I've definitely gotten more confident with the engine, to a point where now I'm towing at 110 kilometers an hour, going up all the hills, and not necessarily worried whether or not the engine can do it, because I know it can now. Well, we are back at the shop, and our final fuel economy is 17.4 liters per 100 kilometers, which is by far the best mileage out of any 1500 we've done on this loop with our 8,000 pound trailer. Granted, on the way there, we were a little bit under speed, but on the way back, for the most part, we were 110 kilometers an hour. So either way, I still think this naturally aspirated V6 is just a really fuel efficient towing engine. Well, I dropped my trailer and it's time for a little conclusion on this 3.6 liter Pentastar V6 in this beautiful Ram 1500. And first and foremost, I understand why Ram put the towing numbers where they are with this V6 engine. Second of all, guys, I don't recommend you guys ever exceed those numbers because, well, you're just going to lower the life of the engine as well as your transmission, most likely. But some takeaways from towing today. So again, I understand why Ram put the numbers where they did, because this engine just does not have the torque to keep this truck rolling at an adequate RPM range up those hills. I mean, this thing was just revving like crazy, 5,000 RPM. If the hills were longer, this thing would have just overheated at the end of the day. You know, if you're pulling mountains, this engine would have 1000% overheated itself at those speeds with that weight. But the silver lining is here, I think, that if you guys need to tow 8,000 pounds, 8,500 pounds in a pinch with the V6 truck from Ram, it can be done. This engine will pull a good amount of weight, but I would not recommend doing it for a long period of time. If you got to tow that maybe 20, 30 kilometers, I don't think you're really going to damage much or hurt anything. I would not recommend going to buy an 8,000 pound camper trailer for personal use, but if you got to tow your buddy's 8,000 pound trailer a couple kilometers down the road, this engine will do it just fine. I think it's also an interesting comparison between GM's base model engine, the 2.7 liter turbo, because that thing was a little bit of a weapon, and it towed my trailer with relative ease. And obviously this thing struggled quite a bit. However, like we talked about earlier, this thing is probably much more reliable than that 2.7, so that is an interesting comparison. Another thing I want to compare this engine to is the 5.7 HEMI, which eventually I'll get on the channel, and it'll be really, really obvious why people get the HEMI, because, well, that thing just has so much more power in it. Anyways, guys, as always, I hope you liked the video. If you did, don't forget to leave that thumbs up, and if you like cool stuff like this, don't forget to subscribe, because, well, we got lots of more trucks to test out, and I'm excited to see how they all compare to one another. Anyways, enough of me. We'll see you in the next frickin' video.